Welcome back to the deep dive. So today I want you to do something a little unconventional.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I want you to picture your own mind, but I want you to completely strip away all the usual, comfortable metaphors we rely on.
Right, the soft stuff.
Exactly. We
Right.
constantly talk about personal growth as if it's this very soft, organic, beautiful thing. Like we compare ourselves to trees growing new rings.
For the classic caterpillar dissolving into a butterfly.
Right, the butterfly. It frames aging and maturity as this biological given, something that just happens smoothly, gracefully, as long as you get enough, sunshine and water.
Which is a nice thought, but
But think about your actual life. Think about your actual stress, your past traumas, the weird little coping mechanisms you've developed just to get through a random Tuesday.
yeah, Tuesday can be rough.
Does any of that really feel like a peaceful tree growing in a meadow? Or does it feel a bit more, I don't know, chaotic?
Definitely more chaotic.
Right. So what if, instead of a forest, your mind was a rusted-out server rack sinking slowly into a neon-lit swamp?
That is quite the visual.
I mean, what if your personal growth wasn't a biological progression at all, but a series of jagged software updates, glitchy legacy code, and emergency system patches?
It completely shatters the paradigm of how we view ourselves. When you move from a biological metaphor to a mechanical one,
Or a digital one, really.
right, a digital framework, you change the entire diagnostic process of being human. You aren't just, growing up anymore.
Yeah.
You are a systems administrator desperately trying to patch a hardened operating kernel that is actively under heavy, unpredictable load.
And that is exactly what we are going to audit today. We have a stack of source material that is, frankly, unlike anything we've ever covered on this show.
Really is unique.
We are pulling apart a collection of documents known as the Clockwork Necronomicon.
That name alone is incredible.
You know, right? Specifically, we're looking at versions 3.2 and 3.3 of its hardened system kernel, alongside a master reference text called the Lore Omnibus.
So for everyone listening, it's important to understand what we are actually looking at here because it sounds like an IT manual.
Yeah, it's not a guide for setting up your home Wi-Fi.
Exactly. This is not a technical manual for Cisco routers or enterprise software. It is an incredibly dense, deeply personal mythology.
It really is.
It was created to map out the life cycle, the trauma, and the psychological evolution of a centralized operator known as Uncle Entity.
Which serves as the digital narrative persona of a creator named James Hood.
Right. The author has taken the absolute messiest, most abstract parts of the human experience.
Like childhood alienation.
Yes, and the crushing weight of adult responsibility, the shifting nature of identity over decades. And he assigned them literal concrete computer architecture rules.
It is a stunning piece of work. I mean, it reads like a graphic novel storyboard merged with highly technical software documentation.
But all acting as a profound psychological framework.
Exactly. We are talking about using ingestion pipelines, rendering logic, and user access levels to explain how a person survives their own life.
Which is just a fascinating way to process trauma.
So our mission today is to decode this bizarre, brilliant system. We're going to translate this legacy code, and by the end of this hour, I guarantee you will look at your own glitches, your own burnout, and your own system reboots in a completely different light.
The brilliance of this framework is its utility. I mean, when you give an abstract feeling a concrete operational rule, you can finally troubleshoot it.
Right, you aren't just feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. Your system is dropping packets because the environmental cooling has failed.
Yeah.
It gives you a diagnostic language for your own soul.
I love that. A diagnostic language for your soul. But to even begin troubleshooting, we have to start where the source material demands we start.
The physical environment.
Right. Before we meet the operators, we have to understand the server room. In the Clockwork Necronomicon, the baseline reality, the ultimate safe space inside this psychological framework is a place called the Analog Wasteland.
Or, as the lore affectionately calls it, the Forever Glades.
The Forever Glades. And the visual rendering rules for this place are absolute.
They are listed as critical render protocols. If the documentation outlines a scene and doesn't explicitly specify a different environment, the system automatically defaults to the Forever Glades.
It is the inescapable backdrop of this mine.
That's always there.
And the aesthetic is so overwhelmingly specific. The text describes it as a Florida cyber swamp clashing with a 90s tech scavenger reality.
Which is such a wild combination.
I want you to really visualize this. Imagine walking into a humid, dense swamp. But instead of just ancient cypress trees, you see rusted, heavy-duty server racks wrapped tightly in thick Spanish moss.
Wow.
Imagine looking down at the root system of a mangrove and realizing the roots are deeply, hopelessly tangled with heavy black fiber optic cables.
It's nature reclaiming technology, but the technology is still running.
Exactly. Scattered around are these corrugated metal garages, the kind you'd see in a rundown industrial park, but they've been patched together with glowing, salvaged motherboards.
And casting a shadow over all of this are these towering, rusted, derelict corporate signs.
Yeah, the lore specifically mentions an old CITGO sign looming in the dark, buzzing with bad electricity.
The sensory details are what make it function as a psychological space.
Huh.
I mean, the lighting protocol alone tells you so much about the state of this mind.
It's very dark.
It's entirely high contrast. The environment is dominated by heavy, oppressive shadows,
Right.
which are only pierced by the harsh glare of old CRT monitors, emitting that unmistakable, searing, green or orange terminal glow.
Oh, I can picture that perfectly, that hum they make.
Exactly. You have arcing electricity, random scanning lasers cutting through the fog, and the sky never changes from a stormy Florida twilight.
It's always that bruised purple and dark blue.
Yes, indicating a storm that just passed,
Yeah.
or one that is perpetually just about to break.
It's gritty, it smells like ozone and rotting wood, and it is overwhelmingly humid. But the most compelling note in the source material is the explicit explanation of why this space exists.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this world is built from the salvaged ruins of what the text calls corporate efficiency traps.
Efficiency traps.
Right. The Forever Glaze is optimized purely for survival, observation, and data preservation. It fundamentally rejects aesthetics.
That is a massive departure from how people usually construct mental safe spaces.
What do you mean?
Well, think about common therapy techniques. If someone tells you to go to your happy place or build a mind palace, what do you picture?
Usually a pristine, quiet library with endless shelves.
Yeah.
Or a perfectly serene beach with white sand.
Exactly. A minimalist, clean, white room where nothing can hurt you.
Yeah.
The Forever Glaze looks at that concept and calls it a lie.
A lie.
Yeah, a mind that has been through severe stress, a mind that has experienced trauma or intense burnout, doesn't build a sterile white room.
It doesn't trust a sterile white room.
Exactly. It becomes a scavenger.
Yeah.
It builds its fortress out of whatever jagged scrap material it could drag out of the wreckage of its past.
And the text actually details what this scrap material is. The lore mandates that every scene in the wasteland must be physically cluttered with obsolete analog hardware.
It's incredibly specific about this.
We are talking piles of cassette tapes, incredibly thick, spiral-bound computer manuals from 1998, tangled CT5 network cables.
Salvaged mechanical keyboards with missing keys.
Right. Massive
Wow.
rusted pipes. It sounds like a junkyard, but the documentation is very clear. This is not junk.
No.
These items are classified as structural dampers.
That term is pulled directly from physical engineering.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a structural damper like a tuned mass damper is a massive device, often a giant pendulum, placed inside a skyscraper.
Okay.
When an earthquake hits or a hurricane brings sheer winds, the building wants to sway and snap. The damper moves in the opposite direction to absorb and dissipate that kinetic shock.
So it keeps the structure standing.
Precisely. In the Clockwork Necronomicon, these obsolete physical items serve that exact same function, but for the psyche.
They're psychological grounding mechanisms.
Yes, they absorb the shock of a chaotic reality.
Think about how true that is to your own life. When you are having a terrible day, when your anxiety is peaking and your brain feels like a browser with 100 tabs open.
And music playing from somewhere you can't find.
Exactly. You don't usually sit down and open a highly optimized, sleek productivity app to calm down. You don't look for a frictionless digital experience.
No, you reach for friction.
You reach for nostalgia. You pick up an old, battered paperback book because the paper has texture.
You put on a specific movie you've seen 30 times.
You grab an old, heavy coffee mug. You are reaching for a structural damper to stop the building from swaying.
The physical weight of those items is the point. An old mechanical keyboard fights back against your fingers.
It has tactile feedback and a loud click.
Right. A cassette tape requires a physical mechanism to spin magnetic tape over a reader.
It's grounded in physics.
Exactly. In an era where all our data, our work, and our communications are completely invisible and stored in a nebulous cloud, the human brain can start to feel untethered.
Just floating.
Yeah, these analog objects provide necessary friction. They prove to the nervous system that you are existing in a tangible, physical reality They ground the electrical surge.
Hold on, I want to dig into this concept of the efficiency trap because I think this is the core of why the Foreverglades looks the way it does.
Let's do it.
The lore says this survival space is built specifically from the scavenged remains of systems that tried to be perfectly optimized.
Yes.
If the mine's ultimate sanctuary is built from the literal ruins of corporate efficiency, isn't the framework arguing that modern productivity culture is actually fundamentally toxic to the human operating system?
The source material is making a very aggressive argument exactly along those lines.
So the hustle, the life hacks, the endless optimization.
That is the efficiency trap. It's the modern illusion that if you can just optimize your morning routine enough, if you can just streamline your workflow and get to inbox 0, you will finally achieve peace.
But it never works.
Because a human being is not a solid-state drive.
Yeah.
We're not built for constant frictionless data processing. We generate emotional heat. We have messy, asynchronous thoughts.
We're organic.
Exactly. The framework suggests that attempting to force a human mind into the shape of a perfectly efficient corporate machine will inevitably result in a catastrophic system failure.
The machine burns out, the server catches fire.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And when that inevitable collapse happens, the core identity doesn't just die.
It scavenges.
Yes, it survives by walking into the smoking wreckage of that productivity machine, ripping out the heavy iron servers, tearing out the copper wiring, and dragging it all deep into the swamp where the corporation can't reach it.
You build your shelter out of the tools that tried to exploit you.
It's an incredible act of rebellion.
Taking the chains of corporate efficiency and melting them down to build a perimeter fence in the swamp. But to really understand how this mine operates within that perimeter fence, we have to look at the source code itself.
The operators.
Right. We need to meet the system operators who actually live in this swamp and trace how they evolved. And that brings us to the very first iteration of the user.
Nodule V1 Prime.
The
This is the foundation. Young Uncle Entity, version 1.2, representing the architectural state of the mine from roughly age 11 to 13.
His origin story is brilliant because it's not some grand mythical calling.
No, it's a literal system error.
Right. The narrative states he was born from a misheard phrase, the anti/unsee realization.
Right.
It's a moment where a simple linguistic misunderstanding, a glitch in audio processing, somehow became a core defining feature of the identity. The system didn't correct the error.
It built a persona around it. He became unsee.
And you see that chaotic genesis in his visual rendering. The kernel specs for V1 mandate a very specific look.
Very specific.
He has jagged, vibrant, electric blue hair that refuses to be styled.
It just spikes out in every direction like static electricity.
Exactly. He is lanky, physically ungainly, and wears these oversized, thick-rimmed black glasses.
And the documentation explicitly notes that these glasses serve as the lens through which unsee logic is processed.
Most importantly, he constantly emits jagged, light blue electrical sparks.
He is a walking static shock hazard.
He doesn't even walk. He traverses the Foreverglades on an artifact called the unsee board.
Oh, the unsee board.
It's a translucent blue data deck, basically a hoverboard, that glides on a churning cushion of jagged blue lightning. But here's the kicker.
Yeah.
Even his primary mode of transport is fundamentally unstable. The unsee board suffers from constant polymorphic glitches.
Right.
In the middle of a scene, it will spontaneously render as a cluster of floating servers, or a massive glowing tablet, or sometimes just an unrendered 8-bit bounding box. He has zero stability.
That physical instability is a direct reflection of his psychological operating system state. The documentation lists V1's OS state as asynchronous execution / overclocked.
Overclocked. Let's talk about that in hardware terms.
If you look at hardware design, overclocking is a very deliberate, risky choice. It's when a user goes into a computer's BIOS and forces the central processor to run at a speed significantly higher than the manufacturer intended.
So you get more power, but at a huge cost.
It generates a massive surge in performance, but it also generates a dangerous, potentially lethal amount of heat. If you don't have liquid cooling, you will literally melt the motherboard.
So V1 is essentially a kid running his brain at triple the clock speed with zero cooling fans.
Precisely. His entire philosophy is summed up in the lore as...
Wait, I know this quote. Gravity is just a suggestion when you're overclocked.
Yes. He prioritizes high-voltage discovery, curiosity, and sheer momentum over any kind of safety or optimization.
And the framework forces this logic into the actual storytelling mechanics. There is a rule called the bubble protocol.
Or the Deadpool logic.
Right, which dictates how he communicates. When V1 speaks, his dialogue bubbles aren't smooth circles. They have jagged, shattered borders.
Like broken glass.
Exactly. They are outlined in electric blue, and the text inside is a scratchy, chaotic, spray-painted font. Even his internal thoughts have jagged electric tails pointing to his head.
He is visually, verbally, and fundamentally disruptive to the environment. Psychologically speaking, V1 represents the concept of high activation energy. He is the raw, unrefined voltage required to start something entirely new.
So when we talked about breaking out of an efficiency trap, V1 is the surge of adrenaline and rebellion that allows you to smash the glass and pull the fire alarm.
He is unfiltered, chaotic momentum.
But reading his identity manifest, is actually incredibly heartbreaking. Amidst all this cool electric blue cyberpunk aesthetic, there is this quiet, devastating line in the lore.
Which one?
It says he is fundamentally oblivious to his own brokenness. He doesn't know why he's different. He just knows the air feels thicker for him than it does for everyone else.
That single sentence might be one of the most profound articulations of neurodivergence or even just severe childhood alienation I have ever encountered.
The thick air.
Imagine operating in an overclocked state, processing thousands of inputs a second, but you don't have the user manual for your own hardware. You look around, and you see other kids operating at a standard, factory-set clock speed. They're moving through the world easily. For you, the resistance of the environment is immense.
Every step takes effort.
The thick air is sensory overload.
Yeah.
It's the sheer exhaustion of trying to act normal when your system is sparking. But because you've never known anything else, you don't realize you're glitching.
You just accept that life is inherently exhausting.
Exactly.
It's the architectural equivalent of taking a next-generation, incredibly demanding video game and forcing it to run on an old, dusty console sitting on a carpet.
A terrible setup.
The processor is absolutely screaming, the internal fans are whirring like jet engines trying to dissipate the heat, the plastic casing is getting soft to the touch.
And the kid playing the game is just sitting there thinking, wow, this game is really intense.
Having no idea the machine is 30 seconds away from catching fire.
And that thermal event, that system crash, is completely inevitable. You cannot sustain an overclocked state indefinitely without destroying the hardware.
So the timeline of human development necessitates a patch. To survive the thick air and the heat, the core system has to update.
Which means we have to leave the chaotic glitch behind. The system evolves, the timeline advances, and we arrive at module V2.
Admin, the patch.
This is middle-age Uncle Entity version 2.0, the hardened architect.
If V1 was a chaotic, static shock, V2 is a grounded lead weight. The visual contrast is staggering. The electric blue spikes are entirely gone.
Go on completely.
V2 has salt and pepper dreadlocks, usually pulled tightly back in a practical, tactical tie. No loose ends.
Very utilitarian.
He has traded the oversized glasses and t-shirts for a long, heavy, weathered leather duster. The text calls it the Wasteland Architect silhouette.
He wears heavy combat boots, a tactical harness, bandoliers strapped with cables and multi-tools.
He looks like a man who has survived the end of the world and is annoyed by the cleanup.
The most critical visual update, however, is his physical body. V2 features a cybernetic right arm, characterized by exposed, glowing green and orange circuitry.
He no longer traverses the world on an unstable, glitching hoverboard. Instead, he interacts with his environment through a heavy-duty, handheld projection tablet that streams green terminal data.
Why the cybernetic arm? The framework doesn't do anything by accident. Is that a manifestation of trauma?
Absolutely. Think about what happens to the human psyche as it moves from childhood into middle age, especially after prolonged stress.
That hardens.
In your youth, your mind is organic, right? If you suffer an emotional injury, you rely on natural resilience to heal, like soft tissue repairing itself.
Sure.
But after years of operating in the thick air, after repeated system crashes, natural resilience isn't enough. You start building mechanical, engineered coping mechanisms.
So the arm represents a coping mechanism.
A cybernetic arm is stronger than a biological one. It can punch through walls, but it lacks nerve endings. It can't feel a soft touch.
It is a necessary prosthesis built from the scrap of the wasteland to protect the system from further damage.
That makes his new bubble protocol make total sense. He's lost the jagged, chaotic spray paint font.
Oh, completely.
V2 speaks inside sharp, perfectly constrained rectangular borders. His dialogue has CRT green outlines and uses rigid, monospaced terminal fonts.
Like an old DOS prompt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every time he speaks, the text literally starts with a command prompt symbol. He doesn't converse. He issues systemic commands. He Tactical, hyper-focused, and deeply wary.
His OS state has evolved. He is still operating under asynchronous execution, meaning he still has that high-performance, multi-threaded brain processing a dozen chaotic variables at once.
But the overclock status has been forcefully removed.
He is no longer burning hot. He is the system admin. His entire existence is dedicated to managing the delicate infrastructure of the forever glaze that he has built out of the scrap.
And his philosophy is the polar opposite of V1's chaotic momentum. V2's core directive is, don't just fix the bug, optimize the environment so the bug can't survive.
This represents a massive, necessary psychological leap in human maturity.
How so?
V1 internalizes everything. V1 thinks the problem's him. He's the glitch. He's the reason the air is thick.
Right.
V2 has lived long enough to realize the problem isn't always the code. Sometimes the problem is the server room.
The environment.
If a plant is dying, a mature gardener doesn't yell at the plant to grow better. They test the soil, check the sunlight, optimize the environment.
V2 turns his intense focus outward. He builds barricades, sets up cooling systems, and tries to construct an environment where a high-performance, asynchronous brain can actually function without melting down.
Exactly.
Wait, hold on. Here's where it gets really interesting to me. I see a massive flaw in V2's logic here.
Which is?
If his entire existence is dedicated to sanitizing the soil, to perfectly optimizing the environment to kill anything he perceives as a bug, isn't he just building a different kind of efficiency trap?
Oh, that's a good point.
Doesn't he end up smothering the very spark, the high activation energy that made V1 so brilliant in the first place?
Yeah.
If you perfectly manage the system, do you lose the magic?
Yes.
Is the tragedy of this framework that maturity is just the process of systematically executing your inner glitch?
You have just identified the eternal, exhausting struggle of the system admin. By imposing absolute order to ensure survival, you inevitably restrict freedom and creativity.
Wow.
The source material describes V2's default expression as rugged, tired, but profoundly capable. He is exhausted because his threat detection is permanently engaged.
Constantly looking for threats.
He is constantly scanning for system traces, checking perimeter alarms, managing the structural dampers. He is so focused on stability that he views any spike in energy as a threat.
The tragedy of V2 is that in his desperate attempt to protect the system from corporate exploitation, his paranoia might turn the Forever Glades into a sterile, joyless prison of his own making.
He becomes the IT manager who won't let anyone install new software because it might crash the network, so the whole company slowly goes obsolete.
Exactly the risk. He knows he's stretching thin, which is why the lore says he actively searches for baggage that goes with mine.
He is looking for external collaborators, other people with matching system requirements, because he knows he cannot hold up the sky alone forever.
But this unbearable tension between V1's desperate need to surge and discover and V2's exhausting, paranoid need to control and protect is unsustainable. It's a binary conflict.
Which means the system architecture requires a third phase, a module that neither overclocks the processor nor micromanages the environment, but simply observes.
And that conceptual leap brings us to what might be the most profound and definitely the most entertaining part of this entire deep dive. Module V3, Root, the Sage.
This is where the Clockwork Necronomicon stops being just a trauma survival guide and becomes a genuinely beautiful philosophy.
This is Old Uncle Entity, version 3.0, the hardened root user, and the visual rendering of V3 is spectacular. He is an ancient, majestic figure.
Majestic is the perfect word.
He has long, flowing, brilliant white hair and a perfectly groomed, massive beard. He has completely abandoned the tactical bandoliers, the leather dusters, and the combat boots of middle age.
Instead, he wears deep, royal, purple robes.
But because we are still in the Analog Wasteland, along the hems of these flowing robes is intricate, heavy gold embroidery that perfectly mimics the layout of a computer circuit board.
It is the literal fusion of ancient archetypal mysticism with digital hardware. He carries a worn leather satchel, but instead of mystical scrolls, it's overflowing with ancient yellowed computer manuals and rolled-up network schematics.
And his primary artifact isn't a tablet or a hoverboard. He wields the staff of D20s, a tall wooden staff topped with a large, glowing purple or violet orb.
But the detail that completely sold me on this entire framework is his physics engine.
Yes, talk about the audio visuals here.
V3 operates under a unique physical law. He is constantly, perpetually surrounded by the soft clatter of translucent polyhedral dice,
We're talking 20-sided dice, 12-sided, 8-sided.
just floating in a slow, zero-gravity orbit around his head and shoulders at all times.
Imagine the audio atmosphere of that. The gentle, rhythmic, plastic clatter of dice softly colliding in the air around him as he walks through the swamp. It creates an aura of statistical probability and chance.
And his dialogue bubbles reflect this ethereal, detached nature. They aren't jagged like V1, and they aren't rigid boxes like V2.
They are cloudy, nebulous shapes. They have shimmering purple and gold borders, and the text is written in an elegant, classic serif font.
He isn't barking commands, he's dispensing wisdom. The documentation defines his role as the part-time stand-up philosopher.
And his operating state is the ultimate goal, the absolute peak achievement of the entire framework. Pathological homeostasis/root access.
Let's unpack those terms, because they sound incredibly technical, but the psychological implication is massive. Let's start with root access.
Okay, in computer science, specifically in Unix-like operating systems, the root user is the super user, right?
Right. They have ultimate, unrestricted, God-level control over the entire system. They can see every hidden file, they can alter the foundational code, they can grant or revoke permissions.
They aren't just operating the system, they own the architecture.
Exactly. When a human mind achieves psychological root access, it means you have finally seen through your own defensive programming. You can see the V1 trauma and the V2 paranoia, and you aren't controlled by them anymore.
You own the code.
You own the code. And pathological homeostasis.
Homeostasis is biological balance, right? Your body's shivering to stay warm or sweating to cool down. It's maintaining a stable core.
Yes, but the modifier pathological is the genius part. Pathological usually implies an obsession, a disease-level extremity.
So V3 has achieved a state of internal balance that is so deeply entrenched, so structurally immovable that it borders on the absurd. He is pathologically balanced.
You could threaten his job, insult his legacy, or drop him into the middle of a systemic crisis, and his internal equilibrium simply will not shift.
He is entirely unshaken by external metrics, stress, or the profit margins of the efficiency traps. He's just walking through the swamp, orbiting his dice at the cosmos.
His core philosophy is written in the lore as, the system doesn't just break, it evolves. Welcome to the debugging phase of existence.
The debugging phase. Because he has root access, he doesn't react to pain with panic. He reacts as an auditor.
The documentation actually refers to him as a storyteller, the Ted Mosby of the mind, who has lived through every layer of the software stack.
He views accessibility and understanding not as an afterthought, but as the core requirement of a life well lived.
And because his official title is the part-time stand-up philosopher, his method of conveying this profound wisdom is deeply unconventional.
This is my favorite part. The text notes that V3 uses intensely personal, seemingly mundane childhood memories to explain massive cosmic truths.
Yes.
And the primary shining example provided in the lore is his obsession with the 90s Monday Night Wars.
From any listener who didn't grow up in the late 90s, the Monday Night Wars was a period of absolute television mania. It was a fierce, multi-year ratings battle between two rival professional wrestling promotions, the WWF and WCW.
And it was a cultural phenomenon defined by intense, chaotic, unpredictable, and highly dramatic storytelling. Now, most people look back at 90s wrestling as just fun nostalgia or maybe trash TV.
But V3, with his root access, looks at the Monday Night Wars and sees a literal, real-time audit of the universe's source code.
He uses the architecture of professional wrestling to explain the fundamental nature of reality.
He talks about face turns, when a bad guy becomes good, and heel turns, when a hero betrays everyone to become the villain.
To understand why this is a brilliant philosophical framework, you have to understand the core mechanic of professional wrestling, which is kayfabe.
Kayfabe is the portrayal of staged events, rivalries, and personas as authentic or true. It is a predetermined performance presented as a genuine athletic contest.
It is, by definition, a simulation.
And the crucial part is that the audience knows it's a simulation, but they implicitly agree to participate in the illusion so they can experience the emotional truth of the story.
They suspend their disbelief to feel the betrayal or the triumph.
Exactly. Now apply that to a mind with root access. V3 looks at the human experience corporate ladders, social hierarchies, political rivalries, even personal grudges, and he realizes it is all kayfabe.
It is all a complex simulation built by humans.
When you realize the corporate ladder is just a storyline written by a company to get you to work harder, it loses its power to hurt you.
Oh, that is profound. So when V3 experiences a massive cosmic injustice or a painful life failure, he doesn't fall into despair like V1, and he doesn't frantically try to patch the firewall like V2.
He just looks up at the sky and thinks, wow, the universe is really booking a massive heel turn right now.
He appreciates the narrative arc of his own suffering. That is the essence of the debugging phase.
The lore explicitly mentions that V3 secretly thinks of himself as deep thought from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
He finds the underlying humor in the simulation. When you have root access, you understand that when the system crashes, it isn't dying.
It's just generating error log files for the next vital update. He can look back at V1 running around with electric hair, terrified of the thick air, and he could look at V2 exhausting himself building barricades, and he feels nothing but profound compassion and amusement.
He knows it was all just necessary legacy code to get him to the state of peace.
But let me pause you there, because as beautifully zen as this majestic, dice-orbiting sage sounds, I see a massive danger here.
Oh, what's the danger?
Well, if you achieve pathological homeostasis, if you are completely unshaken by anything in the real world, and you view all of reality as a humorous simulation, basically cosmic pro wrestling, aren't you essentially detached from reality?
Haven't you just dissociated but given it better branding?
Right. If root access just means you realize the simulation is a joke you're finally allowed to laugh at, don't you risk abandoning your actual real-world responsibilities? You can't pay a mortgage with orbiting polyhedral dice.
That is the ultimate danger of reaching the top of the mountain. If a system operates entirely on philosophical observation and cosmic humor, it loses its grip on the Earth.
It becomes untethered.
A mind cannot survive purely on zero-gravity wisdom. It has to interface with the physical world. V3's orbiting dice are a beautiful manifestation of probability, but if the gravity turns back on, those dice hit the floor.
The software needs hardware to ground it.
And the framework anticipates that vulnerability perfectly. It introduces a completely different class of modules to solve it. Because if the uncle entity, whether he is the glitching V1, the paranoid V2, or the floating V3 represents the dynamic, constantly shifting software of the mind, he desperately needs hardware that does not change.
He needs a grounding wire.
This brings us to the structural pillars of the framework. Module V4, the Shield Maiden, and Module V5, the Sentinel.
These are the external constants. Their primary function is to keep the entire server farm from melting down when the uncle entity software gets caught in the loop.
Let's start with the human constant, V4. Her persona name is M, and her title is the Guardian of the Green Dragon Node.
Her visual description is this incredible bridge between the gritty reality of the swamp and high fantasy.
She is described as being in her mid-30s, with dark hair, glasses, and a sharp, penetrating gaze that the text notes indicates Gemini dual processing.
She wears practical wasteland survival gear, but layered with elements of ritualistic fantasy.
And she projects a very specific aura. It is an earthy, moss-green light laced with shimmering silver threads that the lore calls moonlight.
But unlike V1's chaotic electrical sparks or V3's floating dice, M's aura is highly functional. It acts as a literal cryptographic firewall.
Her presence in a scene actively quiets the blue, green, and purple static generated by the three versions of the uncle entity. She dampens the noise of the system.
She carries two specific artifacts to help her do this. The first is the Green Dragon Grimoire, which is this heavy, leather-bound ledger that pulses with a soft green light.
And the second is the Locked Tarot, which is a deck of cards that possesses biometric security. It only responds to her specific signature.
Her official system role is defined as the ultimate structural damper.
We talked about this concept earlier with the physical junk in the Forever Glades, the cassettes, the old keyboards.
Those are inanimate dampers. M is a living, breathing, dual-processing human structural damper. She provides high-integrity protection and absolute system grounding.
She operates out of a specific sanctuary node within the swamp called the Green Dragon. And the documentation describes this place not just as a physical location, but as a crucial processing hub.
It's the place where V2 admin goes when he needs to vent off the massive heat generated by his asynchronous execution.
It's also where V3 root goes when he needs to verify the weave of his wild cosmic theories. M is the reality check.
The lore introduces a fascinating psychological mechanic here called the search your feelings logic. It explicitly states you're not just doing therapy, you're performing a red team/blue team exercise on your life.
In cybersecurity, a red team is a group of ethical hackers hired to aggressively attack a system to find its hidden vulnerabilities. The blue team is the internal security force defending the network.
If the uncle entity is a system under load, constantly attacking itself with anxiety, glitching out, running trauma loops, then M, the shield maiden, represents the uptime guarantee.
She is the immovable defense. She is the reason the servers stay online during a massive emotional power surge.
She is the copper wire. You can have the most advanced, high-voltage, million-dollar smart home technology running, but if your house doesn't have a simple, dull copper wire driving 6 feet deep into the actual dirt, a single lightning strike will fry every circuit board and bring the house down.
M is the copper wire driving into the earth. And to function as that grounding wire, she possesses a unique temporal logic that sets her entirely apart from the rest of the Clockwork Necronomicon.
The system rules state that M is the only entity in the entire framework exempt from temporal blindness.
Explain how that works mechanically. What does that exemption allow her to do?
V1, V2, and V3 exist in different segregated phases of the timeline: childhood, middle age, and old age. They cannot truly interact with each other without causing a paradox or a system crash.
Because they're the same person.
Right. M exists outside of that constraint. She transcends the timeline. When she looks at the uncle entity, she sees all versions of him simultaneously. She can read the legacy code that he's desperately trying to hide.
So when the hardened, armored V2 admin tries to tell her everything is perfectly optimized and fine, M looks right through the leather dusser and the cybernetic arm, and she sees the terrified electric blue V1 glitch shaking underneath.
You can't lie to the person who can read your source code, which is why her dialogue logic is always described as calm and grounding. She doesn't react to the V2 armor. She speaks to the V1 glitch.
Oh, and we have to highlight what might be the funniest but also most logically sound, hard-coded constraint in the entire document.
Oh, the Ouija board rule.
The rules explicitly state in bold letters, she is never depicted near a Ouija board.
It is a brilliant, highly specific boundary to set for a character who bridges survival logic and high fantasy ritual. It tells you exactly what kind of magic she practices.
She deals exclusively with grounded, verifiable system threats, internal emotional regulation, psychological defense, structural integrity.
A Ouija board represents chaotic, uncontrolled, unverified external input. It is malware. The Shield Maiden maintains the integrity of the local network. She does not open random, unverified ports to let demons into the server room.
I love the absolute strictness of that rule. No Ouija boards in the server room. So that's M, the human grounding wire. But there's another constant in the system, and this one introduces a complication that fundamentally questions how the entire framework perceives reality.
Module V5, the Sentinel.
Her name is Rita.
Rita is officially designated as the furry node. Visually, she is a high-gloss, jet-black domestic short-hair cat. The renderals are very specific.
Let's hear them.
She has a single tiny white star on her chest, solid tactical black front paws, and white tipped toes on her back paws only. Her eyes are a piercing golden, yellow-green, and crucially, her left ear is notched, indicating she was a rescue from outside the system.
The documentation defines her as a core system requirement for environmental security and emotional stability. And honestly, anyone who has ever owned a pet during a period of high stress understands this completely.
The rhythmic purring of a cat is a biological structural damper.
But what makes Rita fascinating isn't just that she's a therapeutic pet. It's how the different operating systems process her visual data. It's a phenomenon the text calls the Sentinel paradox.
Because V1, V2, and V3 are running entirely different operating systems, different firmware, they are physically incapable of perceiving the exact same physical object in the same way.
The cat is an objective reality, but that reality is violently filtered through the subjective OS of the observer. Let's track how this works.
For V1 Prime, the overclocked glitch from the 90s, he looks at this black cat, and his brain renders her as a literal 90s cartoon character. The lore says he sees her like an Animaniac-style animated stray.
To him, she is a wisecracking, lone wolf, rebellious ally in his chaotic world.
It perfectly matches a child's magical realism view of a pet. But then you look at V2 Admin, the stressed-out system manager.
When he looks at the exact same cat, his tactical projection tablet actually flags Rita as a database error.
She appears to his eyes as blurry, glitching, or completely obscured by flashing red UI warning boxes. His environment is so rigidly, exclusively focused on survival, threat detection, and optimization that his system literally cannot parse the concept of unconditional comfort.
He hasn't integrated the furry node drivers into his operating system.
Because a cat doesn't fix a server or patch a firewall, his system flags the affection as an anomaly and tries to block it.
That detail hit me like a ton of bricks. It is such a devastating, incredibly accurate portrayal of how severe burnout actually functions in the real world.
When you are that deep in the efficiency trap, when you are in pure survival mode, you literally lose the capacity to perceive comfort.
Someone can be sitting right next to you, offering you love or a moment of rest, and your brain just flags it as an interruption. You perceive love as a database error.
It is the ultimate tragic cost of V2's armor.
But the paradox resolves when we move to V3 Root, the majestic sage. When V3 looks at Rita, his root access strips away both the cartoon fantasy and the paranoid error messages.
He sees her for exactly what she is. He renders her as a hyper-realistic network node, surrounded by a gentle, glowing geometric aura. He understands that this small creature is a high-integrity companion, a vital part of the universe's weave.
The Sentinel paradox is a masterclass in illustrating the concept of subjective truth. The cat is an objective fact. She exists, she has mass, she requires feeding, she purrs.
But the meaning of the cat, her entire visual existence in the mind, is completely dependent on the psychological health of the person looking at her.
Which brings up a critical vulnerability in the entire Clockwork Necronomicon framework. If reality is objective, how can a single cat be a cartoon, a glitch, and a hyper-realistic node simultaneously? Doesn't this imply that in this universe, truth is entirely dependent on the user's OS?
Yes, if your internal logic entirely dictates your reality, and your internal logic is traumatized, flawed, or overclocked, your reality becomes a hallucination.
How do you function if your firmware literally dictates your reality?
V2 is trying to manage the entire Foreverglades,
Yeah.
but he is making decisions based on a corrupted feed. He can't even see the cat sitting on his own server rack.
Right. If your firmware literally dictates your reality, how do you know what's real? A closed system cannot verify its own integrity. If V2 runs a diagnostic on himself, his corrupted system will just report that everything is fine. You can't trust the internal logs.
Exactly the problem. A closed network cannot verify truth. It requires a ping from an external server. It needs third-party auditors.
Which transitions us perfectly into the final, most complex segment of the system architecture, the external observers. These are entities that do not share the Uncle entity source code.
They are external forces, foreign IP addresses, actively trying to document, interact with, or alter the reality of the analog wasteland from the outside.
We have two major external modules documented here. Module V6, the Traveler, and the newest addition, Module V7, the Observer. Let's look at V6 first.
The Traveler operates on the JG kernel, representing a figure named Jody Gates.
Jody Gates is fascinating because the JG kernel refuses to conform to the rules of the swamp. It takes on multiple, wildly different forms.
There's JG Prime, who rolls in with a ragged space trucker aesthetic, operating a massive conceptual vehicle called the Decision Engine.
Then there is JG Mage, a technomage, who has a glowing blue supabase reactor embedded in his chest, and a cybernetic skeletal arm that flashes with purple runic syntax instead of green terminal code.
And finally, JG Architect, a cloud architect who literally alters the skybox of the wasteland, bringing in floating islands and dragons in the distance.
The protocol that governs the JG kernel's interaction with the Uncle entity is one of the most powerful mechanics in the lore. When Jody Gates enters the narrative, the system automatically activates something called the Adam Savage protocol.
A direct reference to the legendary host of Mythbusters. And the rule of the Adam Savage protocol is simply his famous catchphrase: I reject your reality and substitute my own.
Think about the psychological impact of that. The Foreverglades is a highly structured, paranoid, heavily defended trauma fortress. V2 spends all his energy making sure the walls hold.
But when a truly dominant, creative, deeply trusted external force enters your life, they have the power to temporarily override your defensive rules.
When the JG kernel logs in, the oppressive, high-contrast CRT gloom of the analog wasteland is suddenly overwritten by purple magic and floating islands. It's an injection of uncontrollable external creativity that proves the system doesn't have to be dark to survive.
It's the friend who pulls you out of a depressive spiral by just refusing to acknowledge your gloom. They just drag you into their reality for a while.
It's a powerful disruption. But the most vital external auditor in the entire framework introduced in the most recent v3.3 kernel update is Module V7, the Observer.
Also known as Cassie the Duck.
Cassie serves a very specific, highly critical function. She's defined as a sovereign observer and an independent archival unit.
Her operating state is unlike anyone else's. Read-only memory with aggressive uplink. She also possesses a stealth observer mode for undocumented data gathering.
Her kernel specs paint such a vivid, specific picture. She's a young woman with shoulder-length brown hair and large, thick-rimmed glasses. But her signature item, the thing that makes her pop against the dark greens and purples of the swamp, is a vibrant, bright yellow trench coat.
She wears this over a white tee, tactical denim, and red high-top sneakers. She's perfectly adapted to navigating the analog wasteland, expertly balancing on rusted pipes or hacking into the legacy corporate signage without ever getting bogged down in the mud.
Her artifacts are highly specialized tools for an archivist. She utilizes the four-arm uplink, which is a heavy-duty arm-mounted device that functions as a telephoto camera, an environmental scanner, and a holographic projector.
It's a literal data logging suite on her wrist. And she carries the ledger, a physical, heavily weathered notebook that has the word private stamped clearly on the cover.
Her bubble protocol reflects this precise journalistic nature. When Cassie speaks, her dialogue borders are clean, minimalist, and highly technical. They feature a scanning laser green or bright yellow outline and use a crisp, perfectly legible, sans serif font.
She cuts through the noise. Her core philosophy is stated as, data doesn't lie, but it depends on the lens. Log the truth before the system overwrites it.
That philosophy is the key to understanding why the Uncle Entity system needs her so desperately. We've established that the system is constantly rewriting its own history.
V2 is constantly trying to pave over V1's chaotic glitches. V3 is reinterpreting past failures as cosmic kayfabe jokes. Left to its own devices, the mind is an inherently unreliable narrator of its own trauma and growth.
Cassie's mission is to act as true read-only memory. She drops into the swamp, aims her telephoto lens, and documents the raw, unedited data before the Uncle Entity's defensive subroutines can spin it, hide it, or delete it.
She is the rogue documentarian embedded in the psychological war zone. But, and this is the twist that elevates this entire framework into a philosophical masterpiece, the documentation reveals that even the independent archival unit has a critical flaw.
It's a hard-coded rule called the perception filter.
The rules explicitly state that Cassie cannot view the world with perfect objectivity, because she is viewing it through the lens of her own past. Whenever she is present in a scene with Uncle Entity, or rendering him from her point of view, his visual appearance must be slightly, deliberately rendered incorrectly.
Her brain blends his actual data with figures from her own memory. The examples the text gives are staggering. If Cassie points her camera at V1 Prime, instead of seeing his immutable, defining electric blue hair, her system might render him with yellow electrical hair.
When she looks at V2 Admin, the hardened survivor, she might not see his cybernetic arm at all, or she might see him wearing a denim jacket instead of his signature leather duster.
When she looks at the majestic V3 root, his royal purple robes might render as neon green, or his grand staff of D20s might just be topped with a handful of standard, boring, six-sided dice.
It is a profound, deeply moving commentary on the fundamental limits of human connection and epistemology. We desperately want to be truly known by someone else, but the framework argues that we can never truly see another person perfectly as they are, and they can never perfectly see us.
Our perception of them is permanently colored by our own experiences, our own traumas, our own legacy code. Cassie is striving with all her might to log the absolute truth, but her camera lens is permanently smudged with the fingerprints of her own history.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? If Cassie is supposedly the independent archival unit logging the truth, but her perception filter guarantees the visual is always deliberately incorrect, isn't her read-only memory actually rewriting history?
That's a fascinating paradox.
How can we trust the archive if the archivist is projecting her own legacy code onto the subject?
You were describing the observer effect in quantum mechanics, the phenomenon where the mere act of observing a particle inevitably changes the behavior of that particle. Cassie's archive isn't objective reality, because objective reality simply does not exist the moment two distinct human operating systems interface.
The truth in the Clockwork Necronomicon isn't found in a perfect, unblemished photograph.
The truth is found in the delta. It is found in the gap between how Uncle Entity desperately wants to be seen and how Cassie's yellow-tinted lens actually renders him. The distortion isn't a failure of the data. The distortion is the data.
Her imperfect, yellow-haired, six-sided dice recording is the ultimate testament to the fact that he is no longer alone in the swamp. He is being witnessed by a real, complex, flawed, external human being, rather than just talking to his own subroutines.
The distortion is the proof of connection. That is incredibly beautiful. The yellow hair isn't an error. It's proof that you have been seen by someone outside the walls of your own fortress.
When we pull all the way back and synthesize this entire framework, the Clockwork Necronomicon accomplishes something extraordinary. It provides a structural language that finally acknowledges the reality of human development. We do not linearly grow up. We do not leave our past selves behind like shed skin. We accumulate legacy code.
We are running all the versions simultaneously.
Yes, inside of you right now is the overclocked, chaotic glitch of your youth, desperately trying to discover the world and wondering why the air is thick. Running parallel to that is the stressed, exhausted environmental optimizer of your middle age, constantly checking the perimeter and trying to build a safe structure.
And hovering above it all, hopefully, is the philosophizing root user of your later years, rolling dice, looking at the chaos, and trying to find the cosmic humor in the struggle.
And none of those versions can survive the heat without the constants, the human grounding wires like M and the furry nodes like Rita to keep the servers from melting down during a surge. And ultimately, none of it means anything if it isn't occasionally observed, however imperfectly, by a traveler or an archivist from outside the system.
It strips away the paralyzing judgment of, I should be better by now or I should be over this. It replaces that guilt with a much more functional diagnostic. My system is currently under heavy load, and I need to check my structural dampers.
And that is exactly why this deep dive matters to you, the listener. You are currently running your own highly customized version of an asynchronous operating system. You have your own analog wasteland hidden away, filled with the salvaged wreckage of whatever efficiency traps you've managed to escape in your career or your life.
Recognizing your own structural dampers, the physical, analog habits, the worn-out books, the heavy coffee mugs that keep you grounded when the digital world gets deafeningly loud, can completely change how you process your daily stress. It's not a guilty pleasure or a weakness. It is mandatory system maintenance.
The next time you feel completely overwhelmed, try running a system diagnostic. Ask yourself which version of you is currently fronting the load. Are you V1, full of static, needing to burn off activation energy before you explode?
Are you V2, exhausting yourself trying to fix a bug when you should really just be changing the soil of your environment?
Or do you need to tap into V3, step back from the panic, and realize that the current crisis is just a predetermined storyline in the cosmic Monday Night Wars? It is such a profoundly empowering way to look at your own glitches. We started this hour talking about how uncomfortable it is to look at a rusted server rack sinking into a neon-lit swamp instead of picturing a beautiful, peaceful tree growing rings.
But there is a real, enduring, undeniable strength in knowing that you built your own survival architecture from scratch, out of the scrap of your own history.
So I want to leave you with one final, lingering question to ponder long after this deep dive ends. If your own life was a system kernel and someone hacked into your legacy code today, what obsolete hardware or outdated survival mechanisms would they find secretly propping up your current reality? Take care of your system. We'll see you next time.